The Trump administration is continuing its outreach to faith communities. At the White House on Wednesday, President Trump met with inner-city pastors from across the country. Prison reform and urban redevelopment were among the topics. Trump told the group that his administration is attempting to make it easier for prisoners to re-enter society and find work. He further praised these faith communities for their unheralded work in helping those most in need.
Throughout our history, America's churches and religious leaders have called for change and have inspired us to care for and bring hope back to those in need. So many people in need, they just want to take care of people. But the people realize it, and they love you. They love you very much.
The praise was returned in kind by Cleveland pastor Darrell Scott, who said this of Trump.
This president actually wants to prove something to our community, our faith-based community and our ethnic community. The last president didn't feel like he had to. He felt like he didn't have to prove. He got a pass. This president this administration is probably going to be more proactive regarding urban revitalization and prison reform than any president in your lifetime.
Joining me now with some insights on some other stories of the week is the president of the Catholic League, Dr. Bill Donohue, who joins us from New York. Bill, thanks for being here.
Well, thank you for having me, Ray.
I want to turn our attention, you heard our discussion with Father Jerry and Bob a moment ago. There was a Washington Post piece, and it talked about this McCarrick scandal, and in it, the piece tries to unravel what's beneath the surface of this crisis. I've been listening to a lot of people, Bill, and they're calling for, they want a context and a causes study and a criminality study. We already did this. Tell us about the finding of the John Jay Criminal College years ago that the Bishops Commission and paid a lot of money for.
Yes, it was mostly good. I don't agree with some of their interpretations. I don't fault them at all for their methodology and for the conclusions they reached in terms of the data itself. Here's what happened. They looked at sexual abuse of minors by priests from 1950 to 2002. They concluded that 81% of the victims were post-pubescent males, okay? 81%. Of course, 100% of the victimizers were male. Now, that's obviously a problem of homosexuality. The John Jay study explicitly said that less than 5% of the victims were a result of pedophilia, less than 5%. So all the media who say we have a pedophilia scandal, they're all lying. All you have to do is look at the report. It's been a homosexual scandal all along. And unless we come to grips with that, we are never going to resolve this problem.
Bill, the Washington
Post... We don't need another study to figure it out. By the way, the studies of, article by Robert Mickens finally said, wow, okay, we do have to admit it's homosexual driven. That at least is breaking the ice to some extent and telling the truth. But then he says that's because gays are in the closet, and that's why they're acting out. Well, let's see now. In the 1950s, that was the most traditional period in the history of the Catholic Church in America. We didn't have this problem in the 1950s. There were no reports, almost no reports of any type of sexual molestation and misconduct. The problem occurred in the 60s and 70s and in the 1980s, the first half of the 80s. We know what the timeline is. It's when gays came out of the closet, when they felt free to do whatever they wanted in the 1970s, that this problem exploded. Now, this is not a call to go out and oppress homosexuals. I'm simply saying this, and I've said it before, it needs to be said again, particularly now that the problem is back. Most gay priests are not molesters, but most of the molesters have been gay. Now, let me add one more thing. Every time we have this discussion, especially recently, people think it's ongoing. It's not ongoing. 0.006% of over 50,000 members of the clergy last year had a substantial allegation against him. The year before, it was 0.004. So it's 0.005% of the clergy, of the priests and deacons, over the last 2 years, has had a credible accusation made against him. Our problem is not today. It may be in Honduras and Chile. It's not in America. Our problem today is how to handle the problems that we are still coming out from the 1940s, 50s, and 60s. But let's face it, this is not about homosexuals being in the closet. They came out of the closet, and we know what they did.
Bill, there are others who say, and I've seen this all over social media, that this is an argument that the church needs to open up the priesthood to married men. Consider married men. Your reaction to that? Would that solve this crisis?
Well, I'm tempted to say yes, because the church seems to be unable to come to grips with the homosexual problem. It's that deep. It's in Rome, it's in the United States, it's all over the world. So if they're incapable of reform, maybe that's the only way to deal with it. However, I caution people, the Episcopal Church allows for married clergy. They have a large percent of gay priests in the Episcopal Church. You don't necessarily get rid of that particular problem. Again, look, if you're gay and you're celibate, nobody cares. Unfortunately, so many gay priests, as I say, not majority, but a large percentage of them have been involved. They're the ones driving the problem. It's not pedophilia. We know that. That argument is done with. So we have to deal with the homosexual element.
I want to shift gears, Bill. I want to talk about on Monday when Attorney General Jeff Sessions announced the creation of a new task force on religious liberty. Now, this would be within the Justice Department. It would protect people's religious freedom and convictions. Here's what he had to say about the current state of religious freedom. Watch.
There can be no doubt that we are stronger as a nation because of the contribution of religious people. But in recent years, the cultural climate in this country and in the West more generally has become less hospitable to people of faith.
Now, Bill, the reaction from some groups like Planned Parenthood has been incredible. They call this task force, quote, another license to discriminate against women, LGBT people, immigrants, communities of color, and so many more. Your reaction?
Look, we chronicle this stuff in the Catholic League, obviously, and up until maybe about 9 years ago, almost all of the problems that we had came from the arts, education, largely from the media, in terms of defaming the church. The attacks have been coming from government since the Obama years. The Obama administration was the least Catholic-friendly of any administration in American history. The Trump administration is the most Catholic-friendly and the most pro-life administration I've ever seen in my lifetime. And good for Sessions for bringing this up. Of course, the pro-abortion and the pro-gay groups, they're the ones going apoplectic over this because they don't believe in religious liberty. Religious liberty is a central component of the First Amendment. The idea of sexual orientation and acting out and things of that nature is not a part of our Constitution. It doesn't mean that the gays shouldn't be respected. Of course they should be. But the fact of the matter is, if you have a people of faith, a Mormon couple, could be Muslim, could be Orthodox Jew, could be traditional Catholic, evangelical, and they want to adopt a child, they were looking to do the best that they can to help them, and they might go to a Catholic agency. The Catholic agency is not going to accept two men or two women as parents for obvious reasons. Two men can't really get married. I know it's in law. We know that. In all matter of fact, everybody knows who's honest about it. Two men can never get married. They can't procreate. We know that. So what's happening is that the gays who don't believe in religious liberty, which are the activist gays, I'm not saying the average gay, they are out there trying to vitiate and destroy the rights of practicing people of faith so that you're not allowed to say, listen, we don't go along with that. That's why they had to give up Catholic Charities and all the adoption in Illinois, in Massachusetts, Washington, D.C., and other places here. So we have a fight here going on between gay activists who are trying to erode religious liberty and those of us who are standing firm against them.
I want to bring your attention to a story the AP wrote, and it's gotten a lot of traction, and it's about nuns who are abused by the clergy. Give me your general reaction to it. I mean, when I read the piece, you're talking about half a dozen nuns in Chile, a sister in Africa. How widespread is this, and what do you make of that reportage?
Well, this was Nicole Winfield and one of her colleagues who wrote the piece. It was one of the most editorialized, dishonest pieces I've seen from the Associated Press, and I've seen a few others like this. There are over 700,000 nuns in the world. They talked about six in some other country who claim that some priest abused them. All of a sudden, this becomes another scandal? I mean, it's astonishing to me. They even bring in a book that came out in 2013 which gave rise to this. Well, the book comes out in the 1860s, and it's about lesbian nuns, quite frankly, and about some wacko nun who was a murderer, which everybody agrees on. This is dishonesty. This is an opportunity. What's going on now is to attack the church. We have the McCarrick problem and related scandals, admittedly. And we have the homosexual scandal, which they don't want to talk about. They call it pedophilia. But now you have this piling on, trying to destroy the moral voice of the Catholic Church, and it's not good. And I think the rights of priests are also in jeopardy these days.
There's another story about nuns, which kind of is shocking. The Missionaries of Charity, Mother Teresa's order, is currently under investigation. They claimed that there were allegations, rather, of selling babies for adoption. Now, the Missionaries of Charity stopped dealing with child adoption in 2015 because of the thing you mentioned a moment ago. Indian law allowed for divorced and single people to adopt, and so they got out of the adoption business. Your reaction to this, I know you've been following this story.
Yes, I studied it very carefully, and I agree with Sister Prima, who's the head of the Missionaries of Charity. They've gotten a bad rap on this. There were 4 babies who were sold by a lay woman, not by a nun, not by Sister Christina. Christina was her boss, and she questioned her about this and said, what is going on? She was the one who pressured her on this, and then apparently was forced to make some statement by the police. She told her lawyer this whole thing is a setup. No, again, this is an opportunity, and the bigots have come out in India and elsewhere to say this is the way the Catholic Church operates. No nun was involved in this whatsoever. There was one lay woman who was involved, and they take this as an opportunity to wrap the Catholic Church. And then, of course, some of them attacked Mother Teresa. See, that's why I'm saying the hatred that's out there, and it's in different pockets throughout the world. If you see what an apparent problem in the Catholic Church, let's knee them in the groin one more time and see if we can't bring them down. That's what's going on here.
Yeah, I know that there's those Hindu nationalists who have been exploiting this, using it to political advantage. And now you have Indian officials coming out and supporting the order and saying, no, this didn't happen. So it's troubling. Before I let you go, Bill, in our remaining minutes, your thought on what the church's reaction should be to the reoccurrence of this sex abuse crisis that we're seeing not only in the United States, but globally. How should the church deal with this? It can't be handled on a local level.
Well, number one, I also want to protect the rights of priests, and I encourage people to read the work of Monsignor Thomas Guarino. He's a brilliant theologian from Seton Hall University. He follows in the footsteps of Cardinal Avery Dulles. Zero tolerance has to be rethought. Priests have rights, and we live in a time of the #MeToo hysteria. And let's not sell out the priest with one accusation. These things have to be substantiated, all right? So now what has to be done, obviously, is that all parties to the problem have to be held accountable. The problem, again, is not today. The incidence in the United States is almost infinitesimal. The problem is what to do about some old cases. In Pennsylvania, they've gone back 70 years to the 1940s looking for dirt, and the priests haven't got a chance to even rebut it. So I don't think we need any more high commissions and things of that nature. What we need is honesty and courage on the part of the hierarchy, and most of these men are good men and they have courage. Some do not, and those that do not really need to go.
As always, you can follow Bill Donohue and the work of the Catholic League at catholicleague.org. Bill, thanks for being here.
Thank you so much.